So this session, we're going to talk about how to measure your website's impact and action your analytics. Yannick is going to launch with where to start measuring your website impact. John is going to pick up on how do we measure the impact, and I'm going to round off with how do we turn those analytics into action. So Yannick, over to you.
Morning, everyone. My name's Yannick. I'm a white man with a dark brown shirt. I've got headphones on and I've got bright blue eyes. I'm going to start by giving a bit of an overview of impact and where to start. And then we dig deeper into details and actually where to find that with John and Hans. So websites are an important part of an organization's operation and impact. Um, and there's lots of stuff that we can measure, like so much. And it can be quite overwhelming. So there's always this question of what do you measure and how do you choose? And just to name drop a few, you could be measuring visits to the website, ticket sales, drop off, conversions, impressions, SEO behavior, uptime, dwell time. There's a lot. And there's loads that can be measured. So what do you pick and how do you pick is normally a big question. And I like to say the best way to make it meaningful is just to start with you and your organization goals. Keep it simple. What are your goals? Think about the key income outcomes you want as an organization. So it could be awareness, that you're wanting to build awareness of what you're doing, or awareness of something that's happening, or maybe your goals are income. You have a direct income goal where you're looking for a certain type of metric, or you're trying to reach a certain type of sales on tickets, for example. Maybe it's efficiency. Maybe you have a goal that you want to do more with less. Um, or maybe reach. You want to reach more demographics or different demographics. And it's really important to really start from these goals um, as the kind of like key starter, and then work out what it is that you want to measure that shows those kind of things. Um, and I had a look online just to see if I could find any reports at the end of like a project. And I found the Heritage Fund. And it goes into a lot of detail, but they've got some great reports of how their impact has basically on their funding rounds. And we'll put the link in the chat for the full report. And it goes into a lot of detail. But essentially, they set up principles that they wanted to impact with their goals, with their investment. And they put this nice infographic together. This is kind of at the end of it. So it's saving heritage, protecting the environment, inclusion, access, and participation, and organization sustainability. So this is what the goal of the fund was. And then they had a look at the end. How many projects did we fund that matched those goals? And I assume it's some sort of category, like some sort of qualitative in the application. But I think this gives a really good idea of you set the goal, you look at what it is that you want to do, and you really start from you. And then at the end, you work out how you're going to measure that and put that together. Um, and they also put together another report which basically shows their spending report, spending per person. So there's a real amalgamated report that really puts it together. So before I go on, um, I wanted to throw it out into the room. What kind of goals are you working on at the moment? If you just find a chat and put it into like put a just a it can just be very simple. You can be like increase visitor count, encourage it. Thanks, Rebecca. Encouraging a younger audience. What kind of goals are we working on at the moment? If people just ticket sales, income and reach. Yep, these are great ones. Awareness, ticket sales, sign-ups. It's nice. I know that looking at this, we've got some nice things coming in John's section to do with conversions. This is great. It's fun because it's normally very similar, the actual concept of the goal, conversion or awareness, and it's really looking at the detail of how we can either measure that or brilliant. So I'll bring it back. How does a website fit with those objectives? So there are just bringing it back to the objectives that we're looking at. If it is awareness, maybe it's increasing your visitor count, like how many people are going to pages that you want to increase, and that's how you're going to measure it. If it's income, maybe it's looking at your ticket sales. and increasing the ticket sales or conversions. If it's efficiency, maybe you're spending something like 3 hours on building content, and you want to writing a blog, for example, every week or every month, and you want to reduce that down to 1 hour, and that's how you're going to measure it. And if it's reach, maybe it's that you want to reach different demographics or different areas of the country or the world. Um, and there's a few things that we'll show you in the webinar of how you can really find these and really like use these and take them into actionable places. Um, but just to, with the kind of view of overviewing, I wanted to speak a bit about a couple of measurement frameworks. So these are ways that you can measure or work out how you're going towards the goal. And one that I think we use it a lot kind of on the ground, finger in the air, which is just basically checking the temperature based on very little data. So it'd be something like we did a SEO project and we saw an increase in sales. Or you ask your front of house staff, like, what are people saying about the new brand? And it's like, oh, they're generally positive. Um, it's not so direct. I wouldn't use it in a direct report, but it gives you a good idea of where you're moving in a direction, and it gives you some quite instantaneous feedback, and can perhaps inform your immediate actions. Another one is a rule of thumb, which is basically just working out an average. And it's a bit of a shout out back to I used to do a lot of sales, but it's back on my sales days. And generally, these kind of rule of thumbs are really good for targets. And if you're working on the floor, what you're trying to aim for. So it'd be something like if you're like every 10 page views, we get one booking, and it's about £10. So every page view is worth £1. So I'm going to really aim to get 100 page views because that's worth £100. It's not directly real, but it gives you a real target and a real KPI to, what you're looking for, how you can break down a goal into clear actionable steps. And then later you go into something which is more like analytics and data. So this is where you are really looking at analytics and data, maybe creating a dashboard, a Google spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, so you can really track real numbers. And if you've got Google Ads or Meta Ads running, then this gives you a lot of great data. Another one is qualitative measurements. So this would be you could send out a survey by email. What did you think of the website? Or even invite people in and ask them questions, and you get qualitative data. And then you can really get things maybe about like your impact, your brand goals, things like this. This is a really beautiful way of checking qualitative measurements. And then there's also return on investment, which is more of a monetary check. And it's essentially an equation. You just say how much you made minus how much it cost, divided by how much it cost, times by 100, and it gives you a percentage, and it gives you something you can track going forward. But essentially, return on investment, just at the simplest level, is just what did you put in, what did you get out? How much money or sometimes hours converted to money, and how much money did you get out? And it's normally expressed as a percentage. So it's something you can look at if you're looking for really like targeted, really specific measurement figures. So the process in summary: set objectives, make them meaningful, make them specific to yourself, decide how you want to measure it. So what is it that's going towards those goals? Set up analytics for it, and we'll look at that in a moment. And then make sure to check in and review and take that into action. So thanks very much, everyone. I'll pass you over to John.
Great. Thanks, Yannick. Morning, everyone. My name is John Carter. I'm the web support manager at HDK. I'm a white man with brown hair, wearing glasses and a blue shirt. We've talked through there in the first section why you'd want to measure your website's impact by looking at things like return on investment, goals, and objectives. And in the last slide, Yannick introduced us to how you could do that by setting up analytics and reviewing the data that it captures. But it's a good idea to start with asking, what exactly are analytics? So there's many analytics platforms you can choose from. There's Microsoft Clarity, there's Google Analytics. The most popular probably is Google Analytics, now known as GA4, and that's the one I'll be using in my examples today. A useful place to start with GA4 is to establish exactly what kind of data it is that you're collecting. So I would say to establish that it's a record of digital events that occur on your website. These events meet legal requirements, allowing them to be recorded and shared. And that means no personal identifiable information is tracked, recorded, or shared at any point. So obviously your website does also securely handle private data such as payment details and personal information, but that's completely out of scope for GA4. It never tracks those details. A short note on the word events. This is a Google catch-all term for any action taking place on a website, and it consists of things like clicks, scrolls, downloads, or even a page view, a page loading will count as an event. So how does it work? I think Google Analytics can sometimes feel a little unknowable in terms of how it actually works with your website. So it starts with your website where a snippet of code is installed, which gives Google permission to run analytics. Visitors arriving to your website can choose to consent to this by opting in or out of a cookie being placed on their browser. And those users who do consent, Google will track and record every event that the user takes part in that doesn't include personal identifiable information. This data is then collected and stored by Google and shared back to you via the GA4 platform. So now we have an understanding of what analytics is and how it works. We can get on to what do you actually want to start tracking. And there's a lot you can start tracking. It can be really overwhelming when you first get into any kind of analytics platform. So we've come up with 4 key areas to help provide a framework on how to use GA4. The first of these to consider is audience reach. We've also got audience behavior, engagement, and conversions. So audience reach broadly asks, how many users are visiting your site and what demographics are they part of? So the 4 metrics or the 4 events that are being recorded within Google Analytics is users, new users, sessions, and traffic. So Google does make the distinction between returning users and those that it considers new. Any event that a user is taking part in or doing in one time frame is called a session. And it's these sessions together that equal traffic. Now, throughout Google Analytics, sometimes traffic will refer to users and sessions, but strictly speaking, sessions, all the sessions that are taking place are what's considered traffic. So a good place to start when you're actually in the dashboard, when you're actually on GA4, is in Reports, Acquisition, User Acquisition Report. And this really nicely details total users, new users, and returning users. It's a good place to start. And then in terms of traffic and sessions, again, we're in Reports, Acquisition, Traffic Acquisition Report. And this is a good place to start diving into what session data is and how it's being referred to your website, which we'll come on to in a little bit. Before we do though, one final note on audience reach. You can also look at demographics, such as gender, device, location, and age. And the reports that you might want to use to start doing this are user attributes overview. And you can see there, it maps out really nicely, literally, where people are viewing your website from, and also gives you a breakdown of gender. And then possibly, and more usefully, there's user tech overview. And this is a report that's showing you the type of devices that people are viewing your website on and what browsers they're using. So, for example, I think we probably all know this by now, but the vast majority of people are looking at your website on a mobile device. So it's really important that whenever you produce new copy or have a new website, that you are doing a lot of testing on mobile, because that's where the majority of your users will see you. Coming on then to audience behavior. If audience reach is how many users are visiting your site, audience behavior is how they arrived and how they're navigating your site. So this also can be broken down into 4 key metrics that you can see in GA4. There's referrals, which we'll come on to in a bit more detail, landing and exit pages, i.e. the page that they're landing on, which will often be your what's on or a really good content page, very often your homepage. It's important also to consider exit pages. Where are they leaving? Why are they leaving? Is it after a booking, or are they bouncing after viewing one page that they landed on? Page popularity is another one that people obviously really like. It shows you, is there a piece of blog content that's doing really well? And peak times, and this just kind of helps you prepare to know when you need to get content ready for your website, when it's going to be the majority of people are going to be viewing it. So coming on to referrals. So referrals is a very broad term for the lanes or kind of the channels that people use to get to your website. We've got search engines, social media, obviously your newsletter, and then rather confusingly, referrals. So referrals is the broad name for all of these things, but you'll also see referral in GA4, and it just means from another website. So a good place to get started, a good report to get started on there is the reports, acquisition, traffic acquisition report. And this is one of the ones we looked at before when we were looking at sessions, but I've changed one of the dimensions on this report. So on that first column, I've updated it to source medium. And so rather than just seeing organic or referral, we're now seeing things like Google organic or the name of a website and referral. So that does introduce us to a couple of additional terms that it's good to understand. So on the next slide, we've got some of those terms, which are direct, referral, organic, and unassigned. So you'll see these come up a lot in referral reports. Direct used to mean people who are directly inputting a URL into their browser, but it now covers basically a range of sources that Google can't see directly. So that's why it often is showing up as number one. It can include things like links through WhatsApp or people who are using Apple devices. If you use an iPhone or an iPad, you'll often be asked a question when you first set up: do you consent to being tracked across different websites? So Apple users sometimes have an extra layer, and that's why direct is such a big referral channel now. Referral we've discussed, and we've said that that is basically a website. If you ever see the term organic, which you'll often see paired with organic search or organic social, that just means unpaid. It's a link that somebody clicked on that was not an advertisement. And then unassigned is a little bit like direct, but it's more often used for something like where someone's clicked on a link and the website that they've clicked on no longer exists, or the page no longer exists. So Google puts it unassigned to kind of indicate that it's from a source that you can't really go back or see anymore. Great. So engagement, and this is the third of the four that we're looking at. Engagement are events that measure what actions users are taking on pages. So this it can include things like downloads. If somebody clicks on a download, it's separate from just a click. If somebody plays a video, that's media playback. And if someone's on a blog and they're dwelling on the blog for a long time, or you see signs of scrolling in your GA4 reports, that's a good sign of dwell time and that they're actually reading your blog posts. A good place to get started is reports, engagement, events report. This is a really massive report, so it can help to set an extra dimension to it. In this case, I've narrowed down just to one page, which is our About Us page. So obviously page view will normally be the biggest metric because the page actually has to load for people. But then you can also see the number of, or the percentage of people, the number of people who scrolled. And then finally, a really useful metric for us is to see the number of people who actually clicked on one of our forms. So that report is much better if you can look at a single page rather than your whole website. Finally, then, there are conversions, and these are sometimes called key events in Google. So if you're reading any Google documentation and you see key events, that's what most people would refer to as conversions. It's a type of engagement that you care the most about, and as such, you want to review it on a regular basis. They do usually need setting up in GA4 by your administrator, so the data will already be there, but you need to tell GA4 this type of engagement is one that we want to track as a conversion so that you can pull it through to your key events reports. So some type of conversions. You may want to convert a user to a newsletter subscriber, to become a donor, or to become a ticket purchaser. Just a note on how this actually works. Conversions are typically activities that consist of multiple events. So the user has gone through many clicks and navigation or form filling, and it's the final step of this activity that counts as the conversion. So for example, with a ticket transaction, you may set the confirmation page loading as being the final event, and that's the actual measure, that's the conversion that you're interested in. Just to recap on all of that then. You've got external sources known as referrals, which link users to a landing page on your website. A user's activity while on your site is called events, and all events in the same recorded time frame is known as a session, and collectively these sessions are called traffic. Events where a user has made multiple decisions to interact with the site in a meaningful way, i.e. not just navigating through the site, are called engagements, and engagements that we particularly want a user to make are called conversions or key events. And all of this data and all of the reports that this creates form the backbone of the information that you'll actually see in GA4. So that is what I would call maybe a lot of quantitative data. You get a lot of numbers in GA4, which is great, but not everyone responds that well to numbers. And also it can be really useful to look at qualitative data. So I'm just going to spend some time on a few slides just to look at some other sources that you might want to consider using alongside something like GA4. So the first of these would be user behavior tools. So a really popular one is Hotjar. And rather than just reports, these actually show visualizations of your data. So on the left here, we've got a scroll heat map, and that's showing how far down people are actually scrolling down the page. These often look really similar, red at the top, blue at the bottom, but they become really useful when you have slightly longer pages to actually see, are people getting down to the book now button? Say if you've got that quite far down the page, do we need to move it further up the page? It can be useful for those kind of metrics. And then on the right, we've got a click heat map. This is just really useful for seeing what people are actually clicking on. You can view this in Google Analytics, but this obviously gives you a much more visual aid to show you what content is most popular on any given page. Also user behavior tools, we've got video playback. So this is actual recordings of real people using your site in real time. And one of the really useful things on this is that you can see people go back and forth between pages. Maybe you need to consider what content needs to live on one page rather than people having to flip back and forth a lot. And on the right is an example of a survey, a short survey. We often think of surveys as coming at the end of an email campaign or at the end of a transaction. Short surveys can pretty much appear anywhere, and users can fill them in a couple of seconds versus a couple of minutes, and you can get a lot of interesting data back that way. There's obviously also your email campaign reports. So although these aren't strictly about your website, they do show how engaging your content is. So the two really important metrics here are the open rate and the click-through rate. And when you compare these campaign on campaign, it's a really good indicator of what content performs well, what's actually getting people through to your website. And then, of course, you can compare that with the data you get from GA4 for the page they're linking out to. We've also got ticket systems. So I would say there's three ways ticket systems can really help. You've got integrated visitor feedback tools in a lot of ticket systems that often will apply a note to a specific customer's account, and you can then aggregate those and actually look at the data that your real customers are saying about you. There's standard reporting where you can look at things like what events are selling out, how quickly they're selling out. Do you have events where they're selling out on the day they go on sale, or is it more towards the event date itself? And then many ticketing systems now also include business intelligence. And this is a little bit like having a kind of a version of GA4, but within your ticketing system, looking at your ticket system data. Someone said, are these short surveys hosted by Hotjar? Yes. So the previous 4 screens that I showed about behavioral tools, those are all in Hotjar. Finally then, and one that I think a lot of people overlook, is the qualitative data you can get from staff. So as someone who used to work in a box office, I know that we were constantly being told about the website, both good and bad. And all of this data sometimes goes into your front of house staff and just kind of lives there and doesn't dissipate, doesn't go anywhere else. So I think it's a really good idea to set up some kind of channel between your front of house staff and your marketing team, just so that you can hear all that qualitative data that they're collecting. At which point we start to get into how you can actually use all of your newly acquired data. And at that junction, I'm going to pass over to Hans.
Thank you, John. So thank you, Yannick has got us going with analytics, and John has shown how we measure what's happening. I'm going to focus on what we do with that information, or how you action your analytics. And with that, the real value comes from when we use it to make better decisions about our website or our marketing. And to help with that, I have a simple framework that we use in a variety of contexts here at HDK that I wanted to share with you today. It's really simple, easy to remember, and once you've got it in your head, you'll find different applications. It's a phrase, it's what, so what next? What, so what next? And and we might use it, for example, when we are writing a conclusion for a report or a presentation, but I want to show how we can use it in this context today to basically simplify the way that we might approach analytics. So I want to explain what so what next means. And it basically means what happened, or what do the numbers tell us in this context. So what? Well, why are these numbers important? Why does it matter? And what next? Well, what change can we bring about, or what change can we test? And to give that a little bit more context, I'm going to give you a sort of a real world example. So the what happened could be, for example, visitor numbers have increased on a product page. So that page might be for an event, an exhibition, a show. It could be for a book that someone could buy. And if that page for that product has increased significantly, it might be because you might question whether it's happened because the page is helping visitors to make a next step. So so what is, well, why is that important? Well, it could be because you're about to you're just about to put it on sale, or the exhibition is about to open. So interest for that event or that product is high. So what next? Well, what might you want to change? What might you want to test? You might want to look and see if you can optimize the booking visibility, or optimize how people find out more about that event. So a really simple framework that you can use in many contexts when you're thinking about your analytics and when you're looking at your analytics. And there's another thing to think about. I want to think about, with all of that data at our fingertips, and let's face it, in this digital age, there is so much data we can access. The risk is that we might get overwhelmed with all of that data. So I want to think about 3 key report types that we might want to focus on, that anyone can focus on, whether you're a beginner or whether you're more advanced at looking at analytics. And these 3 report types are top pages, conversions, and traffic sources. And John showed us some of those already. So if we look at top pages, you might think about which pages attract the most visitors. And you might be asking yourself the question, are these pages the pages we expect to be at the top of our ranking? Do they help people move forward to what we want them to do on our website? And by that, I mean our conversions. And as John illustrated, there are a lot of conversions we might look at. So ticket purchase, and you shared them in the chat as well. Newsletter signups, donations, memberships are just a few that you mentioned as well. But there might be more micro conversions. It might be how many people have downloaded a PDF of a resource pack, or how many people have watched a video that you want them to watch. Conversions. And then finally, traffic sources. Where do the visitors come from? What do they come from search? Do they come from email campaign, social media, partner websites, those sorts of things? So top pages, conversions, traffic sources. If you get into the habit of focusing on those three, there's a lot that you can achieve to create impact through your website. And just to remind you what those were, the examples in Google Analytics, and let's face it, that's while we have different sources of information, the one that we most commonly have access to is Google Analytics. And on this one, this just shows a list of the top pages on the HDK website. It shows that the first one in the number one slot is our homepage. You can see in the bottom left. It doesn't say homepage because it's the default page, if you like. But below that, webinar seems to be our second most popular at the time frame that we're looking at. Then we had a product page underneath webinars, and then we were recruiting last month, so we had a vacancies page as a popular page on our website. And then next to it, you've got the amount of visits that we've had on that page. On this page, on this report, these are some of the conversions within the website, similar to what John showed us earlier on. We've got how many people looked at a video or scrolled down the page, had submitted a form. Those sorts of things are shown on this page. And there are other ways of looking at the other conversions, both within Google Analytics or your other CRM or other systems as well. And then finally, just again, as John showed us, the ticket source, the sources to that page. You saw the more generic ones in John's session earlier on, but also these ones are specific referrers, Google, ChatGPT, Bing, those sorts of things as well. So those three types of reports, and I don't just mean these specific ones, but those types of reports can really help you work out a plan for what you might want to do, how you want to create change on your website, and how you might create impact from that. But it's not just these snapshots. What I really want to think about, or what's really important, is to think about the change over time. So analytics becomes more useful when we look at the trends rather than just single numbers. So for example, you might have a conversion rate of 2%. It could be good 2%, it could be a bad 2%, but it really depends on the context. And a lot of that context is over time. But if you can see that has been growing, say, over the duration of a campaign you've been running, or as a result of a change on your website, that's going to tell you something much more useful. So it's not just the numbers, it's how those numbers are changing. And I want to illustrate that quite simply with our own website, the HDK website. You might have visited it on your way to this webinar. You might have seen it before, you might not have done. But we are in the process of about to change our website. So we're about to launch a new website in about 6 weeks' time, maybe. And the team delved into the analytics, and some of the analytics that they brought out was that there was we had a 74% bounce rate. So that is when people come to your website and then they go off. So they don't explore the website, they don't look at any other pages. There's lots of reasons why that is. So 74% might be a problem, but it might not be a problem either. The other things that they found out that most users don't scroll very far on our homepage, and that key sections are rarely seen. So they've used these, or they're going to use these as benchmarks for when we launch the new website. Has the new design, has the changes that we're making to the new website, will that change any of those statistics? Will it increase how people find more of the sections on our website? Or will people, or do we need to make all the information sit above the fold so that they don't have to scroll because people aren't scrolling? Or what can we do to make people scroll through the pages? So these are all the follow-on questions that we'll ask as we are designing the new pages for the website. So of course, we're just doing this as preparation for a new website. But you don't have to do it because you're building a new website. In fact, it can be better if you're doing this when you're trying to improve your existing website. And for that, we might use something called an analytics loop. So this, I think, is a really simple concept of where you start measuring something on your website. and you use the website tools that we've discussed, such as Google Analytics or the other sources of information you have. We look at something, we try and find an insight, we learn from that, and then we make a change or we make an improvement. We hope it's an improvement. And then we come back and we measure it again and we see if there's been any change. And if there hasn't been any change, we might try something else to affect that change. Or if it has improved, we might move on to something else. And then we follow that loop again and again through the website with this idea that you're making just one small change at a time, and you're just keeping a steady process of doing this maybe month by month or whatever period works for you. And you're just constantly making these changes one after the other. And this small change, what we love at HDK is seeing those small, simple steps, simple changes that maybe don't make a big difference, but when you combine them, they make this compound effect that really improves particularly maybe sales or something else on your website. So that's the analytics loop. And this is what it can lead to. It can lead to improved key pages on your website, those most, let's say the home page or the what's on page or those pages that are really important. It can lead to improved campaigns. It can lead to navigation and better user journeys. It can lead to improved content. So these changes, as I say, don't need to be large. Often those small improvements can make the best or the biggest differences. And analytics should ultimately be guiding those decisions. So I think it's easy to come together with your natural instinct, and those can be really powerful when making changes to websites. But sometimes what we encourage or we advocate that we always come back to the analytics or the data, and we look at how we can improve those pages by adjusting campaigns and refining the content. But as I said, that's a lot of data that we have access to and a lot of things we can do. I've tried to simplify it with a simple framework and 3 key areas. What would be really helpful now is maybe to think about the common pitfalls that we might want to avoid. And maybe you've experienced some of these and there are lessons here that you're happy to share in the chat box. So I want to ask, what are the common pitfalls with looking at this data? I know there's some very experienced people here in the audience. What are your common pitfalls? And to sort of just get you going, to maybe think about it, my first common pitfall, I've hinted at it already, is that maybe there are too many metrics. And sometimes we have to think about how we can refine those. So please, in the chat for a few moments, can you share vanity metrics? I love that one. How long will you be waiting before you assess your new website? Oh yeah, I'll answer that question later. Yeah, getting massively overwhelmed is definitely an issue here. Making too many changes at once. Information overload. Colleagues not caring about the data. That reminds me, I've been in board meetings and seen board members looking at the data and really not knowing how to interpret it, what to do with that data. Chloe's saying she gets lost in Google Analytics. By the way, thank you very much for everyone for being honest with these. Lack of clarity in organisation goals and the knock-on effect. Hopefully, these simple techniques might help you to clarify that. So I had another 2 just to share and then we'll move on. So I've got also the numbers without context. I think someone else referred to that as well. And collecting data, but not acting on it. 3 classic common pitfalls that we can think about and try to avoid with our campaigns. Sam says, I noticed that when we shared links on our social media posts, where we shared links to other people's websites would be more popular than posts where we shared links to our own website. So it's really useful to get those insights. And I just want to end up with a simple habit that we can all think about. The monthly habit, I call it. What's changed in your analytics? Why did it change? And what can you test next? So that's the what, so what next? And if you can diarize that, put it into a monthly habit, hopefully you will see the impact that can be created over a long period of time with your website. And I think that gives us a nice 10 minutes to round off with any questions or discussions that you might have. If you've got any questions, please put them into the chat. Thank you, Rosie. Rosie asks, how can you tell when a statistic is good or not? do you recommend any sources on benchmarking? Yes, that's a good question. Thank you. How can you tell if a statistic is good or not? And I think for me, I would probably start off with it depends on what you're trying to achieve. For example, you could be talking about, oh, webinar sign-up's not working, someone said. So, for example, it really does depend, to answer your question, Rosie, depends on what you're trying to achieve. And I think this is where I was talking about comparing things over time. So looking at the conversion rates or engagement rates over a period of time, and look at relative performances, for example, relative performance. So which pages are better than doing others, which channels convert better, and using your own benchmark. So I think benchmarks is very much, and that's why we talk about benchmarks. They're very much personal into your situation. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add on that. People often ask what's a good conversion rate, because it's such an important piece of the puzzle. And I think a conversion rate is really personal to you. I've seen people compare themselves and go, oh, I know of another website that has, a 3 or 4% conversion rate, and we've only got 2.5. But you really have to look at your own over time and kind of, I would say conversion rates become useful when you track them, say, year on year, because obviously your organization will have its own ebb and flow of when it's busy. And comparing to other organizations is not necessarily that useful, because you might have a really huge site with lots of content, which might force your conversion rate to be a bit smaller. Or if you're a site that doesn't have a huge audience, but it's a very keen audience, you might have a slightly higher conversion rate. So they're very personal. You can benchmark against other people. And in tools like MailChimp, they do have a industry benchmark as standard. But it's best to kind of track against yourself, I would say.
If you are looking for benchmarking, it's a good reminder that especially arts, culture, and heritage, our sector, um, we work as there's a lot of collegiate kind of feeling, a lot of community feeling. So there are like meetups, like for example, we go to the AMA, and there are places where you can, engage with colleagues, and there's also newsletters with different colleagues sharing different case studies. So there are, insights into working out, finding out what other people are doing, because I think we're all invested in the arts and want success in the arts. So there's something about there is a lot of information out there as well if you're engaging in community. I saw a
Thank you,
question
John.
which was about where does GA4 get its demographic information from, and how reliable is it? I don't believe we have the Google Signals piece switched on necessary to collect this. Do many cultural ticketing organizations collect demographic data this way? The biggest way that Google gets that information is people being logged into a Google account. So when you set up a Google account, you have that form to fill in where you say name, age, gender. So um, generally people put the true figure in there, but it can also just be, random figure. And that's the biggest place that Google Signals gets that demographic information from. So you can see when you go into Google GA4, you'll see a snapshot of it will say something like 20% of the data had Google Signals available. I think what Hans was saying, it's a good trend looker. You don't have to look at a very true figure, but it gives you an idea of trends going forward.
Right. Thank you, Yannick. And then I think Charlotte asked the question. I used to work at an MPO where we could have access to amazing data about customers who were or weren't engaging with us, such as postcode, wealth, age, and gender, and types of people like hipster. I love that. Now I work for a council-run venue, and no one has any of this data for us to use, and there isn't a desire to have it because we don't have to report to the Arts Council. But I want to continue my work in audience development. Can GA4 give that kind of categorized data? What kind of people are booking with us? So short answer is no. GA4 can't give that level of audience profiling. Its demographics is very much based on a broad model, and it's not as precise as that would have been.
It sounds like you were using I'm going to take a leap here and say some sort of CRM system or some sort of system hooked together. These things are totally possible to get. It depends on your privacy policy and how you hook things together. We've been doing lots of integration projects recently, hooking together CRM systems into the website to get this kind of data. And it's essentially once you've set it up, it is simple. As in just ask people to, add in their email, name, where the postcode, and then it's just where you put it together and how you do that kind of audience development work. If you don't have access to that data, it's a good question how to continue doing audience development. I think the demographics in GA4 is going to give you a trend. And I think that you can use these other techniques that we've been using, like the surveys, like Hotjar, like qualitative measurements, and that would be where maybe I would start. And something is better than nothing. I always think.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that helps. Hopefully, that helps Ruth with her question. Is there any way of getting more specific location data? I work in a really specific postcode, so Leeds isn't helpful, but LS141 is. Yeah, and then Chloe has added that the audience agency can help with some of what Holly's talking about. As a local authority, we run a new culture website where arts organisations upload their own opportunities. We currently measure success through numbers of users, and our only conversion really is people clicking on outbound links to events that organisations have uploaded. Are these the right kind of indicators of impact, or could we be looking for more? And okay, Charlotte's also mentioning, different Charlotte, sorry, it was Audience Finder that we use. Arts Council gave us targets to get responses. Anything else from John or Yannick at this point?
The outbound link. Holly, do you have any access to speaking with the other arts organizations? Because another metric you could be measuring is how many, I'm not sure exactly what the opportunity is, but how many people converted on the opportunity, and then people can report back to you. That could be another conversion. But generally, outbound link is you're telling people how much traffic you're directing from your website. So it does sound like a good indicator of how much visibility and how much digital footfall you're sending out.
Great. Thank you, everyone, for your questions today. If there is a question that we've missed, we'll go through them afterwards and we'll include them in the write-up. And just to say thank you again for joining us today. I hope to see you at a future webinar, and yeah, have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.